Hello, fellow warriors. Welcome back to another episode of Divided, Survived, and Thriving. Today, we will dive into what is often a misconception around divorce, and that is divorce discriminates. Now, what I mean by that for today's episode is that divorce is harder on those who are considered the underdog or those who have no personal income and have not worked in many years. Well, today we will debunk that theory as divorce, the process of divorce, and the overwhelming hurt and pain does in fact show up for everyone, and everyone needs help through it. I am Laila Aitken Ali, a divorcee, a divorce coach, and the founder of Split FYI. And as some of you already know, I enjoy interviewing badass humans who have not only survived divorce, but have come out the other side to control their lives and continue to rewrite their story. So these conversations are about turning a painful process of splitting into a positive force in your life. Without further ado, my guest for today is Sharon. And I met Sharon via my father, and I instantly was hooked by her presence, her relatability, and her willingness to be raw and real about her own story of divorce. Sharon is a mom to a teen daughter like me and a sales exec in the field of electric mobility. She enjoys doing regular parent things, trying new restaurants, and reading contemporary fiction. She's also a steadfast believer that tomorrow exists for a reason, which I love. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to speak to our audience.
Thank you so much, Laila. I'm so looking forward to talking with you and just happy to be here.
Yes. Well, we had, when the first time I talked to you, and my father put us in touch, which I think I always have to give credit to my dad. He always knows, okay, you've got to talk to this woman. You've got to talk to this person. You would love them. And he's always right. So we'll give him credit. And I remember, it's the way that you told your story with divorce was something that I think, is commendable in the sense that it happened and it's something that was hard for you, but yet you saw it in a different way. You got your help you needed. You saw it in a different way and you came through it. So maybe let's start with sharing a little bit about, where you were at in your life when divorce was presented.
Yeah, that's, and when you say that I shared the story, came through it, I mean, it took time. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't, day one, 8 o'clock, oh yeah, let's get through this and, let's power through. It was definitely a process. And where I was when it's even kind of, I'm struggling with getting my head around where was I in life when it presented itself, because in so many ways it was a long drawn out, kind of bubbling up. But from a professional standpoint, I had worked in a large corporation for 13 years and decided, this was about 12 years ago, that I was going to leave and join the startup world. And so I love it. I've been working for startups for the last 12 years. I love it, but it does often come with a lot more kind of volatility and movement than a giant corporation. Right. And so when my divorce started kind of bubbling up, I and really kind of, hit the fan sort of thing, where I had to take action and things were moving along. I was actually in the midst of making a transition, a major career transition to a different company, but also an entirely different industry. And so, there was, when I say there was a lot going on, I kind of also feel like, well, there's a lot going on for everybody, especially women, all the time. So, yeah, right, exactly.
Others, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's, I think that you're right. There's never a good time. How about that? Like, it happens and it happens. And that's why actually this conversation comes up a lot in the divorce world. It's like, maybe I'll wait, or maybe it's right. When they're older, or, maybe a couple years when I can get my, mm-hmm. job security done, or this. There's always, and there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with that. And I'm not saying that's a
mm-hmm.
wrong decision to do, because clearly it's like you should get your house in order, your mind in order before you're going to make this leap of, changing your whole life, right? In divorce. So, and it is, as we discussed, before the episode, is that it's such an emotional roller coaster. No matter what, even if you prepare yourself, you're never fully prepared.
Right, exactly.
So how did you find that? Like when you were in, and this is what's interesting is like, yes, okay, so you were in a transition with work, you were in a transition in life, but emotionally, like, were you surprised by all the things that you faced, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, it's never a good time and you can't really be 100% prepared. You have not lived through the experience, at least not the exact experience. And so you can only be so prepared, even if, like I said, I felt my divorce was a long time coming, but you're still not preparing yourself in that way, kind of the daily experience of it and the emotional experience. So it's a kind of a turmoil. It's a lot, you feel a lot of things. And I felt a lot of things. And I think looking back, the two kind of primary feelings that I can think of that I recall, and they were really acute. One was honestly relief, that you're, finally doing something that is, that you have known would be the right thing to do, but like you said, delayed for a number of reasons. And, so there was no question about it at that point. And so I did feel an overwhelming sense of relief. And then the other feeling that I remember, and can still just kind of conjure or, relive because it was so acute, was a sense of fear. Fear because you don't know what's going to happen. As you mentioned, I'm a mom. And so I was really scared about, my daughter and what would, scared for me on, will I somehow lose her? Will I lose time with her? What's going to happen? Will I miss out on certain things? But I was also scared for her. What will this experience be for her? It'll be terrible. It'll impact her for the rest of her life. Like just a lot of things, but it kind of distills down to I think those two things for me, relief and fear, two separate, things, but coexisting and kind of wreaking havoc in many ways. So
Well,
yeah.
I always say that it's like there's polarized feelings always in divorce,
Yes. Yeah.
and it always feels like you're like one step forward, 10 steps back sometimes, and it's always a little bit of a tug of war and an emotional roller coaster for sure when you're dealing with it, but especially when you have children. And,
Right.
And what's interesting and going back to what I was saying earlier in, the intro is that, discrimination around it in the sense that it doesn't discriminate. None of these feelings, everyone has them.
Right.
Every single person faces those feelings no matter what, even if they're 100% sure divorce needs to happen. There is such a transition in your life that you're going from married to separated that it's inevitable that you're going to have some sort of those feelings, some kind of feeling around that, right? And job security, it comes up again a lot of times. There is, in a couple, one of either the husband or the wife, they maybe say, okay, we're going to, raise the children. We're going to be the ones that are going to I'll raise the kid. You go to work. There's always a separation. And so they feel more vulnerable when they're going through the divorce. But again, even when you have a job, it's like keeping the work, being able to show up and work while you're going through a divorce. Your brain capacity is so, and they say this, there's studies around it, that you think 25% less, like you're completely, in a fog because there's so many emotions and you're worried and you're fearful and you're this. And so, showing up for work is really difficult as well. So can you talk to us, like, tell us, and this is what I love, I remember what you said you did and you ended up doing. What helped you through that? What did you do to help you get through that?
Yeah, because you're touching on, again, got me recalling the situation, and it's a great thing to be able to say like, oh, I can, I need to pull it out of my mind. It's not, kind of front and center anymore. And that's a beautiful thing. But when you get divorced, if you had at one time, let's say, some degree of support from your spouse, in managing work where, they might say like, oh, you have an important meeting, I'll pick up the kids today, or all that can often end, right, when you're in a contentious kind of situation. And so you're really trying to navigate it on your own and keep all the balls in the air. And so regardless of whether you're a professional or maybe if you have family, that would be a huge blessing. But anyway, a lot of things are, I think, shared kind of experiences for people going through divorces. And for me, I did some of the things that really were incredibly helpful and impactful, and I think 100% changed my outcome. First is network of people, right? Your friends, your family, relying on them, opening up to them, and understanding that resource is there. And so I really did just, it took me a while, and you're, kind of inching your way toward opening up and selectively, but then your behavior is reinforced because you get so much love and support back. Yeah. And so, just being open and asking your network for help from your friends and family and support. So that was a huge revelation to me. Mm-hmm. I also read a ton of books. And so I was getting, these packages from Amazon every other day, and of books that I thought would be helpful to me to navigate my own particular situation. And some of them, I would read 10 or 15 pages and be like, okay, this is not really meshing for me. Right. And then of course I would dog ear and read over and over certain passages and say, this is really helpful. So it was a bit, hit or miss. But I would definitely say that was useful and helpful to me. And then the third thing, which was a huge thing, I was introduced, it's kind of came full circle. So I talked about opening up and leaning on your friends. And one of my very, very good friends introduced me to a woman who is a divorce coach. And they happen to be, kind of in true mom fashion. My friend and this woman, their children went to school together, and so I got introduced that way. She knew her, and so anyway, she was a divorce coach, and I ended up hiring her. And I am in touch with her today. There are moments when I need her for something, need some support still. And she really, really kind of just change the outcome. And I 100% believe that, not because she, was in there kind of fighting the legal battle or anything like that, but she changed my perspective. Right. And she did that by almost like liberating my mind from some of the fear. Mm-hmm. And just being there for me. And so, and she also, had, I don't know if this is true or not, Laila, and maybe you do, but I was going to say, well, she had, her own personal story, and she had lived it. And I was going to say, as most divorce coaches probably have, but I don't actually know if that's true.
I mean, I would say majority of them do. It would be very strange if they didn't, right, because it does. I mean, the want and the desire to help others get through it, it really comes from having experienced it, having been there, really understanding it. And some divorce coaches actually come from somebody who's worked in the industry, understands maybe in the legal, paralegal side of things, gets it, how people get stuck, how people can't move forward, or their fears are driving them for it, right?
Right.
So, okay, right. Let me help people that way, because if you can get to that part of things, then maybe the results will be a lot better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my particular case, she definitely had her own experience, and it was eye-opening to me. It was eye-opening to me in just how helpful she was to me, and how much practical kind of, information, advice she had, that, I mean, just spanned everything from the way I was looking at things, or maybe I could, position this, and things that were really important or not important in the big scheme of things, but also from a judicial system, this often happens. And I mean, she's just incredibly helpful to me. So
it's giving
yeah.
you, I think that part of, and I love that you said that, by the way, not just because I'm a divorce coach, but because, and I see the value of it, because, when I went through my own divorce 12 years ago at this point, and it was a long-winded divorce. I mean, I was in and out of court for about 10 years. So I would say that, that's the one thing I wish I had, was that person who gave me that insight and that perspective, coming from either having been there, done it themselves, or worked in the industry and understands what to expect. And it's normal, normalizing the things that you go through, because as you experienced also, sometimes you feel like you're the only one. Like, am I the only one feeling this? Am I the only one facing this? Is this only happening to me? Because often we do, even if we read articles of people saying they went through it, it's still not the same of having a body that sits there and reminds you and tells you, and kind of is your side, thinking partner, your cheerleader through it all.
Right. And I think that's a really great way to describe what a coach can be. And certainly what Erica was for me was kind of this, amalgam of, you have a professional who really knows her stuff, but also they're a very certain kind of professional where they can also be a little bit of a friend to you, and like you said, the cheerleader, the support, because it's different than if you had if I'm struggling through the divorce and I'm feeling emotionally vulnerable and I say, oh, I'm going to go get a therapist. I could do that, but the experience is very, very, very different. Right. And so I think the divorce coach experience, again, for me, was that incredible, multifaceted, support system of knowledge and friend and partner and somebody who's there for you in a really tough time.
Yeah. I unfortunately didn't have that. I did rely on my therapist and my friends. And I think that was what really, it inspired me to be that person for other people. And I completely get it. And I love that you're saying that, because it's okay to need that type of help. It's okay that, your friends can't be there for every single thing. And sometimes it's really good to know that. It's great to have great friends. And I had amazing friends, but also they don't want to hear your story all the time. And they don't want to be that person that you have to rely on all the time, because they want a reciprocal relationship, right? They want to be like, hey, wait a minute, I have a problem. Can you listen to my problem for a second? Because unfortunately, when you're going through a divorce, you really start, it's all about your story right at that moment, right? Especially when you're in the heat of it. You got your, you come in and out of it. And
that is very true.
Right. And it's a healthier relationship with friends and your family around you if you don't rely 100% on them for every single thing getting through it. Plus, their allegiance is with you on every single thing. And so they're going to say everything that you think you want to hear.
Sometimes that basically turns into bad advice, and so I think that's a good call for everyone, to rely on your friends and family for love and support, but do not, try not to go to them for everything when you're going through a difficult time.
Right. Not all the advice, that's for sure. And, I often say this, I think I said this on a live one time with a mediator, and of course he loved it, because I said, most people, if you're telling them, or your family or your friends, that you're telling them you're getting a divorce, they're like, lawyer up. Their first advice is the best lawyer up, get the hardest core lawyer, because they're protecting you, because they think that's the only way that you can be protected. Right. So
yeah, I mean, and we could go on and on about what you might get from family, and it could be like, oh, go for the jugular, or it could be like, no, try to suck it up, and like, don't get divorced, stay married no matter what, like whatever, right? And so that might not be the right advice for you.
Well, anyway, I'm grateful that you said, and you mentioned your divorce coach, because I think that is such a important component for people to think about when they're going through. And there are so many amazing coaches out there that also offer so many free resources, free advice, they're out there. And I encourage people to go and find one that works for them, you know. But on what you said in the conversation earlier was, you know, you read a lot of books. Now, I did the same thing, by the way. I couldn't even watch TV. I couldn't be stimulated by things around me. And books were my thing. Books and auditory books. Like sometimes I had to listen to some of the books. So tell me, you know, can you share the audience, what are some of the books that you would suggest or that worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, so I don't know that I'm gonna really be able to pull out the ones that really mattered because they were very specific to my situation. And so I read a bunch of books about co-parenting, and I will admit that I read a bunch of books that, you know, skewed toward, you know, like, what if you're in a toxic relationship, like those kinds of things. But I also read a lot that was about kind of about yourself, right? Not necessarily what do you do when you're navigating out of a toxic relationship or navigating a divorce or things like that, but books like Untethered Soul and, you know, just and there's another one that I liked a lot that seemed so basic, but and it's called Crazy Good. And these are not books that are specific to divorces, because again, I read a ton of those, but they were very much what I thought was relevant to my situation.
For sure.
And so, yeah, you know, I think that there's a ton of resources out there in the form of books and internet, you know, kind of web pages and things like that. But it becomes almost like, well, which one? Like, which one is a good kind of, you know, where do I spend my time? And like I said, I ordered a bunch of books from Amazon and they would land, and some of them I'd say like, no, no,
Yeah.
not me, you know, so
You
where,
can
you
feel
know,
it, right? In the beginning,
yeah,
like when you start reading, and it's so true. Like I'm one of those that, oh, if somebody said there's a book out there and I haven't read it, let me get it and try it out. And it isn't the same for one person than for the other, right?
right,
It's anything like a movie, like all of that. But I do suggest that everyone try, you know,
yeah,
to read. And what I like what you said, it's not about just reading about the divorce process or helping you through certain things about particularly through
mhm,
divorce. It is about yourself. So all of these decisions that you make, all the things that you go through in divorce require you to be trust
yeah,
yourself, require you
100%,
to know thyself, right? And so if you
exactly.
don't feel like that, then you're always going to be fearful and insecure about what decisions you're making, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you know, and I think if you can kind of navigate yourself into the driver's seat, and then, you know, books will help you get there, the content of books, and you go to what is your biggest source of, you know, fear, or is it about custody? Is it about co-parenting? Is it financial? You know, and try to kind of figure some of that out with the help of friends, family, coaches, books, internet, and, you know, just kind of get yourself back in the driver's seat so that you're not a prisoner to the fear. And I was definitely for a while.
Right. So was I. And, you know, and like you said earlier, like you touch in with your divorce coach,
Mhm.
Erica, because, you know, it still can show up sometimes. And it's an interesting
That's
thing
right.
that it's okay. It's not like, it's not a button that you push and you're like, I'm over it. It's all done and it's not going to show up again. It does. There are things that trigger. There are
Mhm.
things that remind you of something. There are things that you get fearful of at a different stage of life, especially when you have children. And so you're always kind of connected with your ex in that sense,
Right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not that different than if you were to hire a professional, you know, a coach to help you navigate through the business world, that sort of thing, which more and more people are comfortable doing and making that investment in yourself. And if you are fortunate enough to be able to make those choices, I think of, you know, my divorce coach, Erica, in the same way, where if I'm, you know, struggling 3 years later with communication,
Mhm.
and I don't have a choice about, you know, communicating or not because we share a child, then
Right,
I, you know, would say like, hey, can you work with me for, you know, a few months?
right.
And so it is a constant degree of connection, and sometimes it's stronger and sometimes it's, you know, like it kind of ebbs and flows. But I feel like she's always there for me.
Right. Which is great. And I think that feels, and that builds also the confidence. I often work with, when I work with my clients, I realize that a lot of the sticky points are the communication bit, because it's really difficult to communicate with someone that you've gone through really much like really hard times, right, up and down.
Right.
So
Right.
to find the way to communicate that it's not going to trigger also World War III and all those things, and you're fearful of it. So can I speak my mind? Can I do this? And sometimes just having somebody think, yes, you can, and there's a way that you can do it, and here it is, just encouraging you with the things you already know as well. Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And
So
it's making me laugh because, some of these things that you're saying, just the nodding and like, yes. And because I do think that so much of this experience is as unique and individual as each and every one of our experiences are, in so many other ways, they're the same,
you're so right, and that's what I, why I wanted to, have this episode was because I, you know, listen on paper, like, and I met you, as this exec, and I remember it was through for business, also to talk about certain things. And we ended up talking about your divorce story in a way, such a way that I say, like, look, it really happens.
Mm.
Everybody has these feelings. Everybody experiences these things, in different ways, different times, of course. What they do with it is different. How they viscerally feel it is different. It manifests in so many different ways, but we all go through it, all of us.
Right. Right.
So, and I want to reiterate that. And I also people to understand that it's okay to get help, and it's okay to have that person that you can rely on that's outside of your family and friends. Find that person, find that person that really helps you through.
That's
Really.
right. That's right.
So one of the questions I also ask my guests there's a couple, but I don't know if there's any quotes that you've kept inside of you, or that, that helps you through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing because I love quotes, and if
Right.
my daughter were here, she would kind of roll her eyes because I'll often post, one that I'm thinking resonates in our lives, or it might be inspiring for me or for her or both of us, and I'll post it on the refrigerator and rotate them, and she'll be like, "Oh, how long is this quote going to be up here?"
Yeah.
But if it kind of inspires some thought, I'm good with that, if any of them do. But one that I'm thinking of in our conversation is the quote, "Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it."
Yes.
And it is a quote that's attributed to Charles Swindoll, the pastor. But I think it's so just apropos to what we're talking about and what you just said, right? That if you can kind of get out of the fear and get in your own decision making and sort of directing your outcome, and it's it is a behavior that I do think is learned in many ways, where if you've kind of gotten in the habit, or I don't know what the right kind of underlying driver is, but if you've find yourself in a position where you're kind of feeling like a victim, that is nowhere to be, right? That is nowhere to be. And I think that we often shy away from the responsibility because you're like, oh, it's not my fault, kind of thing. But that's such a terrible spot to put yourself in, because it gives you no control over your outcome.
Right.
And so, the 90% of your life is how you react to what happens to you or what's happening in your life. That puts you in that, position of making the right decisions and just influencing your outcome and getting the desired outcome and all of those things. And it's 100% true.
Yep.
Right. And so I love that, that, you are not empowered until you are accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And then like off you go, right? Like go make the right decisions and go make your life happen. So I love that one.
I think it's great. I think, part of the conundrums of going through divorce, everyone feels like they're not in control. And to a certain degree, with the judicial system and all that, and the law, yes, you're not in full control 100%, but you are in control of the way that you design your life moving forward, the way that you communicate, the way that you show up, the way
Right.
you show up for your kids, the way that you show up as a person in your, in your environment, the way that you show up for yourself. That's number one. It is oftentimes we forget about ourselves when we're going through this, and our health and our well-being, and
Right.
what do we want? What do we say? There's so many misconceptions because we're holding on to a story that was meant to be and not embracing the pivot, not embracing where we're supposed to be going, right? So everything you just said and that quote, I love it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just thinking of just the simplest thing that my coach helped me through and it does relate to the quote and making your own choices, where, I had expressed to her how stressful I found it when I would just see an email from my ex, and I would see it in my inbox, and I would say, like, it just makes me so anxious, and and I get nervous and anxious and fearful. And she pretty much was like, but you're choosing to react that way, right? Like, you're and in a gentle, kind way, right? And she kind of helped me see that I have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, do you really have to open it that second? And I was like, no, I don't, right? I have a choice. And she's like, you might open it tomorrow. You might open it in 3 hours. You might recognize it as something you don't have to respond to right this second, because it causes you all this anxiety. And I thought about it, and I was like, you are so right. And it really diffused, the anxiety that came with that particular situation for me, and made me kind of moved me out of this is happening to me to like, oh, I choose how to react to it.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, I had the same feelings, by the way. And I remember that moment that every time I would see my ex's name anywhere, I was like, oh my God, what does he want? What does he want? And it's like, why am I saying that? Like, first of all, we share a child. And I'm like, let me just take a deep breath. Right. And I love what she said to you, because you can choose the moment. And that moment can be when you're really feeling secure and good. And I actually tell often my clients saying, well, why don't you call a friend and say, hey, hang out with me while I'm opening up this email?
Yes.
Or, call somebody and say, I'm about to read this email, so I just want your presence to help me through it, or your coach, or whoever it is that's helping you. And don't ever open it on a Friday to ruin your weekend. There's nothing important that needs to be decided on over the weekend. That's
and there are some things that don't, I think this is also pretty common, and I could say this generally in divorce situations. There are probably emails that you don't need to reply to at all.
I know.
And so anyway, she taught me that, and it definitely was am I letting this happen to me, or am I going to kind of control the way I feel? So that was just one very, very simple but super important thing for me, because it made my life easier and better once I implemented her advice.
Right, exactly. Well, all of this is, everything that you've said is fantastic. And I hope that it really helps people understand that it happens to everyone, and it's the way you look at it, and it's what you do, and it's how you help yourself as well is really important. It's okay to cry. It's okay to hit the floor and, feel like the walls are closing in, because I've felt that way too. And it's all right to go through the emotions, but at some point you got to really do everything that can help you get through it, right? And know there are little steps outside of just relying on friends and family, but there are things that you can do, which is, and everyone needs it. So the last question I always ask, my guests is what does it mean to thrive, right? Because I say divided, survived, and thriving. Now, thriving is very different, and it doesn't mean that you've got it all sorted out, in my way. But what would thriving mean to you?
Yeah, and I love that, and I've thought about the way you, kind of lay out the divided, surviving, thriving, because I do think there's a chronology, right? And most, if not all of us, go through that, the first, surviving kind of, the before you thrive, because you're just, it's a progression for me, thriving, and I do feel like I'm thriving. And what it means to me is that you can genuinely be out there and feel kind of joyful, and even and I'll just use us connecting, when your dad, who is amazing and awesome, and I felt the same way about him when I met him, like in, just quick connection. And then I met you when we had our first conversation, and there's like a joy to connecting with another person that you share some story with, and you feel it. And So, you know, to be able to feel those kinds of moments and connections with people who you've known for a long time, or brand new people, and just feeling joyful and being able to laugh,
Yeah.
is one thing, that to me that feels like thriving, right? Like that you're this person, this is where your mindset is. You're not, you know, distracted by kind of negative thoughts.
Right.
And then the other aspect of thriving that I feel is, being able to be generous. And I don't mean with things, or, you know, just being able to give support and love to other people and feel great about it, you know. And I think when you're mired in the struggles of getting divorced and trying to process all these hard things, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to thrive. But I would like to think that we all get there, and we can. And, you know, so to me, that's kind of the confirmation that I'm thriving, is that I feel, great about being able to give the support. And the biggest person that applies to is my daughter,
Right.
you know, and being able to support her, and be dialed in, and just share moments with her that are important. Because I also know the flip side of not having been able to do that, you know, at certain times, because I was so caught up in other things. So,
Right. It's so true.
yeah.
Being present and
Yes.
in your lives. Yeah, 100%. It's so true. Well, I thank you so much. Honestly, thank you. This is such a great conversation, like always. And you know, I really appreciate you taking the time to share these insights,
Good.
these
Well,
thoughts, and you know, again, I think it's relatability. It's so people can understand, like, you know, it happens, and you know, and you'll get through it. You really do. Everyone does.
that's right.
We had mentioned this before, you know, we started recording. It's like divorce is not the end, it's the beginning. It's the beginning. And if you look at it that way, it's like one little sentence that you can say to yourself, and you keep saying to yourself, it's that mind shift. You know, it's like, hey, this is the beginning of a new life. This is the beginning of something that can be really exciting and amazing. And you know, to your point of thriving is the joy of being present with other people and being fully present, and not having that, I'm in a really bad relationship, or I'm not
Right.
happy, you know, distracted by all of those things. No, you're creating new relationships. You're creating, you know, strong relationships, you know, with the people you're with, because you're available. So
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. It's always great and fun to talk to you, but I really enjoyed this conversation.
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Sharon, once again for that amazing conversation. I hope that it added some perspective to your own divorce process, no matter what your situation or where you are on your journey. Know that things do get better, and you are not alone. If you do need some more support right now, please join our private Facebook group, Split FYI Divorce Support Group, or follow us on Instagram at Split FYI. You can also find me on IG as The Split Coach. To join our divorce portal, you can find more information on www.splitfyi.com. Now, as we know, stories are our reminder that no matter how hard it gets, you can get through it, learn much from it, and heal and embrace the journey ahead. If you have a story you'd like to share, please contact me at Laila, Laila, at splitfyi.com. Thank you. See you next time.